The day of Christmas was a day of sheer horror turned fairy tale in literally the span of a night. It's something that I'll never forget, but I feel like I'm internally at peace now. It all started when I was on my way to the mall to do some Christmas shopping with my family. Our household was a family of 4, which consisted of myself, my parents, and my older brother Jimmy. We had planned to buy some last-minute gifts and snacks for our family road trip, which was set to take place the following day. Visiting my relatives who lived on the other side of town became tradition during the holidays. As we pulled up onto the parking lot of the mall, my mom began to reverse her vehicle into an available parking spot, only to get rudely honked at by another car. I looked across my window and saw a man who was literally dressed as the Grinch, with a strange resemblance to Jim Carrey. I assumed he was dressed up for some cheap Christmas gig that the mall hired him for. My mom rolled down her window to give a piece of her mind till the Grinch said,
"Holy knockers, I mean, ho ho ho, Merry Christmas and all that. Would you mind getting out of my parking spot? I was here first."
Your parking spot? You can kindly park somewhere else, bud.
What? You heard the lady. Now park somewhere else before I park my fist in your face. I bet your wife wants me to park this Big Mac truck in her little garage, ho!
As the Grinch drove off in a rage, my family and I got out of the vehicle and began making our way towards the mall. I recall seeing hundreds of people scattered across multiple stores, frantically shopping as if there was some sort of sale going on. That's when I noticed from the corner of my eye that my parents were buying my brother a toy from a nearby Christmas shop. I politely asked if I could get the same toy, but instead got the cold shoulder. They refused to buy me any gifts due to my lackluster grades and performance at school. When we got home, I remember making myself vocal that I opted to not participate in the family road trip. My dad and I butted heads for the next hour or so and finally came to the conclusion that I was going to stay home this Christmas. As my family was getting ready to depart the following day, I heard my mom and dad saying stuff like,
"Meg, he's not budging. The little shit is stubborn as hell.
Mark, we can't just let him stay home alone. He has to come with us.
We can't afford to spoil him anymore. The twerp keeps failing in every class."
Just buy him a stupid toy so he can come with us.
Don't worry. It's just one Christmas. Maybe the twerp will get his act together.
Ugh, we're gonna go to hell for this.
and there I was, home alone on Christmas Eve. I genuinely couldn't believe my parents had the balls to leave me at the house by myself, let alone on Christmas. Throughout the night, there wasn't much to do except snack on food while watching a few Christmas flicks. I wondered if I would receive any calls from my parents asking if I was okay, or a simple, "Merry Christmas, son, wish you were here with us." But unfortunately, there was none of that. Just the normal exclusion I was used to as I sat there watching the television. As I began to wither away in my deep sleep, I woke up to my fire alarm going off. I could see my Christmas tree being burnt in a hazy flame as my dog was barking in the kitchen.
What the hell is going on? Somebody help me! Mom! Dad!
I darted past the living room and into the kitchen where the landline was, only to see the same Grinch my family encountered earlier. He was shoving my dog in a cooking pot as I shouted,
What the hell are you doing? Leave my dog alone, you freak! You're awake now, scallywag. Just in time for a triumphant Christmas dinner.
"Who are you?"
You still daydreaming, you lousy dingbat? I'm of course the Grinch.
"Why are you doing this?"
Maybe if your lousy mother would have relinquished the parking spot, we wouldn't be having such a dark Christmas.
The Grinch then creeped past me and into the living room, where he then climbed up a rope in the fireplace. I crept in the fireplace following the Grinch and yelled,
So is this what Christmas is all about? Burning alive, home alone? Home alone, you say? All I wanted was Christmas presents! Is that too much to ask for?
My whole world completely changed when the Grinch said,
You climbing up or what, kid?
I couldn't tell whether the Grinch was playing possum or not, but ended up climbing the rope anyway. And from that point on, the rest is history. It's been a couple years since my disappearance. My parents currently don't know where I am, and I doubt they even care. As a matter of fact, the whole world doesn't know where I am. But rest assured, I finally found the happiness I've been searching for. and some of us never find.
That's a good boy, Joey. Christmas will always be a marvelous time. Now you can get all the presents in the world. You know that I love you very much, right?
Yes, Daddy. A few years back, my family went to Universal for Christmas. It was around that time that they just opened up their new replica of Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, and my friend and I both wanted to go. Neither of us were loaded enough to stay at the resort inside the park, but we were able to get rooms in the same cheaper hotel just a few miles away. As tainted as my memory of that weekend is, I clearly recall that the day we spent roaming through the park together was a blast. Everything was festively decorated and covered in snow, a big deal for Florida boys. After a long day of walking through the park and visiting all the attractions, pigging out on various chocolatey culinary concoctions at the chocolate factory, and coercing our parents into buying a bunch of gifts, the sun was setting on our Christmas vacation. However, we still had one more night at the hotel. Our parents had planned this in advance and had gotten a little too drunk to drive all the way home. While our parents were passed out in bed, my friend and I couldn't sleep. Our minds were buzzing with all the things we'd done that day, and we didn't want it to end just yet. We were dueling each other on a mobile game when he messaged me. "Yo, I saw a gym on the way up. You want to race on the treadmills?" My feet were still sore from all the walking, but it seemed like a good way to blow off some steam. Sure, but how do we get in?" "Don't worry about it. I'll use my room key. Just meet me on my floor." That meant I'd have to sneak out and go downstairs, but that wouldn't be hard. My parents were out cold. The only trouble I had was finding where they put the room key so I could get back in unnoticed. It took several tense minutes of digging through my mother's purse in the dark, but I finally found it. I carefully opened the door and slipped out, heading quickly for the elevator. I only got a few steps in before I heard somebody walking behind me. I stopped and turned around, and immediately got stranger danger vibes. There was a man standing in the hallway half dressed as Santa Claus, and by that, I mean he was half naked. All he had on were the boots, the fake beard, and a stocking cap, along with the most strange pair of stained briefs I've ever seen. Other than that, he carried a flimsy red sack that didn't look very full at all. I immediately spun back around and started power walking to the elevator. I heard him shuffling behind me, trying to catch up. When I got to the elevator, I spammed the down arrow. I knew that wouldn't make it go any faster, but my panicked brain was willing to try anything. By the time the doors finally opened, I could feel the creep right behind me, breathing down my neck.
Well, aren't you going in?
"You can go first."
No problem, my little angel.
I stepped aside and let him through. As he boarded the elevator, he sang,
"All I want for Christmas is you."
Then, he retrieved something from his limp sack and stretched his arm through the doorway, holding out an unwrapped candy cane. There was a bunch of red lint from the sack stuck onto it, but not wanting to aggravate him for any reason, I took it without any intention of eating it. Finally, he dropped his arm and cleared the doorway. We stared at each other for a few unbearable seconds, until at last the door slid closed and I was freed from his gaze. I didn't see him push any buttons, so I was worried he would open the doors and reappear at any second. To make sure I didn't run into him again, I took the stairs down to my friend's floor. But, of course, my woes were not done for the night. The first thing I saw when I opened the door into the hallway was my friend having a seizure. I dropped the candy cane and rushed to him, calling out for help.
Help! Help! Somebody call the cops! Help!
My friend was frothing at the mouth, his eyes pure white from rolling back into his head, thrashing violently despite all my attempts to calm him down. There was nothing I could do. It wasn't until he'd already gone limp and unresponsive that people finally emerged from their rooms to see what was going on. I'm no doctor, but I knew at that point he was already dead. Nobody ever talks about how people empty their bowels and bladder in their moment of death. I'm not a detective either, but I had a pretty good idea as to what had killed him. Clutched in his dying grip was the same kind of dusty, unwrapped candy cane that the half-naked Santa had given me. In the following months, I was subpoenaed to testify against that worthless turd of a man. And during my appearances in the court, I got to learn far more than I wanted to. The hotel security cameras had ample footage of the man stalking multiple people in the hallways and trying to offer them his candy canes, which he laced with some kind of extremely potent poison. No matter how many times he raved about it, I'll never understand his delusional motive. Something about bringing people closer together for Christmas by sending them all to heaven. I don't even care anymore. But the civil suit against the hotel is still going on. I hope my friend's parents get a fortune from that hotel for their negligence. Letting a man like that roam around their hallways during the holiday.
Ho, 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 ho. Groundhog Day has always been a strange tradition to me, ever since I learned what a groundhog really is. It was my older brother who taught me, and I'll never forget it. But I guess, just like everyone else, I'll never speak on it either, and I'll keep the sham about those timid little mammals alive. That being said, I need to know that I'm not alone in hiding the truth about groundhogs, those buried secrets. For this reason, I'm sharing a key childhood memory to the internet, anonymously of course. It was Christmas several years ago. I was much younger then and far more ignorant. My family, me, my older brother, and our parents had rented a winter cottage in the countryside for the holiday weekend. They wanted to get away from the noise of the city and retreat to the old-fashioned ways of living. Furnaces and firewood, no connection to the outside world and all that. The rustic essentials. All my brother and I cared about were the wide-open spaces of trees and fresh powder without one chaperone in sight. On the first evening, while our parents were preparing dinner in the cottage, my brother and I were out playing in the snow, building forts and staging great battles with snowballs. Then, to our surprise, another kid around our age appeared from within the trees, and we stopped. "Hey, you guys must be the new visitors. Do you think I could join in?" We shrugged and let him over. For the rest of the evening, we teamed up as brothers against the alien invader, pelting him with snowballs from our impenetrable forts. He quickly got tired of our camping. "Hey, you guys should follow me to this clearing I know of. There's way more open space. Don't worry, I live around here, so it's safe." "Nah, man, it's dinner time for us. Maybe next time, dude." "Both of you are a bunch of chicken shits." We ignored him and went inside the cottage. Dinner was on the table waiting for us, and man, was it delicious. Don't knock firewood smoked ham until you've tried it. That stuff put us right to sleep. The next morning was Christmas Day, and also our last full day at the cottage. We were to leave the following morning on Sunday. For the first little while, we were stuck inside, opening presents with our parents and doing all sorts of obligatory bonding activities. We were itching to get outside the whole time. Snow just doesn't fall the same in the city as it does out in the wilderness. Finally, when they started on dinner once again, my brother and I were free to resume our snowball fight. We built up our defense forts even more, but right as we were about to launch the first attacks, the same kid from yesterday showed up again. "You boys gonna hide in your little trenches all day again? Or are you gonna come join me on the battlefield like real men?" His delivery struck a nerve in both of us as we were huddled with our faces in the snow. "Fine, man. We'll go, but we're gonna destroy you." "That's what I like to hear." "Wait, let me tell Mom and Dad we're leaving first." "Oh, come on. Do you need Mommy and Daddy's permission for everything?" This kid and his harsh words were getting to me. I gave in and joined my brother in his vow to pummel that jerk with snowballs. So, we followed him through the forest for about half a mile until we reached the massive flat clearing surrounded by huge, towering trees. The kid threw first, without warning, so my brother and I teamed up again and did battle for several hours. Not that I liked the kid, but it sure was fun to have a real enemy for a snowball fight. After a long, heartfelt fury of battle, all three of us were ready for a break. The local kid retreated into the woods for a piss, while my brother congratulated me on a war well won. As soon as the kid returned, he was back at it with the snowballs, except they weren't normal snowballs. They were yellow. He nailed both of us in the face with yellow snow before we could react.
Piss balls! Get got, chumps!
I started to cry, but my brother had a different reaction. I saw the rage flare up in his eyes before he ran the kid down and threw him into the snow, grappling on top of him and laying into him with fists, swing after swing, without end. All I could think about was how late it was getting, and how we'd need to get back to the cottage before it got dark.
Stop! Stop! I'll call the cops! You'll go to jail! You're assaulting me!
My brother was unfazed. He continued to beat that poor kid into a bloody pulp. Eventually, there were no more screams. Yet still, my brother maintained his barrage of punches, splattering crimson into the snow surrounding them. I was so confused. I'd never seen my brother do anything like that. When he finally let up, he came to me and put a bloodied hand on my shoulder. Hey, little bro. Help me bury this kid in the snow.
What?
Hurry up or I'll beat the crap out of you too. The shock of the situation sent me into autopilot. I helped dig the hole on my hands and knees, still tearing up. And when I caught a look at that poor kid's face, or what was left of it, I nearly vomited. As we covered the body, the sun began to disappear beyond the horizon, along with my innocence. The rest of that weekend was unbearably tense. We returned to the cottage in darkness, late for dinner, and got interrogated by our parents. Neither of us said anything about what happened, just a load of flimsy excuses. We didn't eat much either. We couldn't. That night, when neither of us could hope to sleep, my brother did his best to explain everything. That was just a groundhog, little bro. Don't worry about anything. Lots of jerks like him become groundhogs. People call jerks pigs and hogs all the time, and the ones people hate the most end up in the ground, buried in the dirt or snow, like we just did. Haven't you heard of Groundhog's Day? It was a lot for me to handle, learning that what we did was actually a Western tradition, that those little rodents are just used to conceal the grim reality. I still find it hard to believe, but you tell me. It's unfortunate how some things that used to be fun and magical could be ruined by one thing or another and become boring, embarrassing, or downright depressing. Like last Christmas, my entire extended family reunited at my parents' house for the holidays. Now, there's a certain age in between childhood and adulthood where stuff like Christmas rituals come off as more cringy than anything else. And out of all the people there, my cousin and I seemed to be the only ones in that boat. So when the whole family, my parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents, and nephews, and everyone else started singing Christmas carols, my cousin and I traded a silent look from across the room, which screamed, "Let's get the heck out of here." Sure enough, we knew just where to go. The gigantic public ice skating rink in the center of the town's prided park. Around that time of year, it was always open late, and it was always packed. Say what you will about how ice skating looks. It's one of those things that's truly fun for all ages, especially if you like watching newbies repeatedly eat facefuls of ice. My cousin and I skated around for about an hour or so before we decided to take a break. The monumental Christmas tree which loomed over the rink had a number of benches around its base, so that's where we elected to rest our ankles. But we'd barely had the time to loosen our laces before we were approached by a man dressed up as a cracked-out Grinch.
Good evening, boys. Having a fantastic Christmas? Get any gifts?
Yeah. Only lame ones.
Oh, that's just perfect. Santa Claus is just a big fraudulent butterball, isn't he? Well, I'm not. Dude, I could tell you put that green on with Sharpie. Your hair's just right, though. Forget about that. When I say you'll get a present from me, you can bet your life on it. Oh, yeah? What'd you steal from Whoville this year, Mr. Grinch? That's when the Grinch put on the most wicked of smiles and revealed from a scrappy sack a brand new PlayStation, still in its box. My cousin and I both changed tunes the moment we saw that. You want this? Yeah, of course you do. But if you want it, you gotta do me a favor. A trade. You gotta climb to the very top of that big ugly tree and fetch me the crowning ornament. My cousin and I traded an uneasy look, then looked up to the top of the tree, searching. I don't see anything up there, man. I mean, there should be, but... Oh, it's there! Sure as a forgotten New Year's resolution. It's there. Alright, man. I'll take you up on that. Make sure he doesn't leave, cuz. Before I could do anything to stop him, my cousin hopped the fence around the base of the tree and started his way up, climbing with a purpose. I kept one eye on him, and the other eye on the Grinch, to make sure he didn't run off. However, within a few seconds, I started to realize that he seemed more invested in my cousin's climb than either of us. His black, pearly eyes gleamed with anticipation and glory, fixated on my cousin as he inched closer and closer to the top. Soon enough, some of the other people around us took notice of the man climbing the tree, stopping to point, gawk, and take pictures. Finally, when my cousin made it to the top and still saw nothing, he shouted down to us, "Where's the ornament?" "You are the ornament!" The Grinch shoved the PlayStation into my arms and came within an inch of my face as he said, "Merry Christmas, kid." Then, he ran towards the tree, hopped the fence, and threw his scrappy sack onto the ground at the base, pulled a lighter out of his pocket, and set it on the sack. I don't know what was in the bag, but as soon as the little flame licked the fabric sack, it shot up into an intense tower of fire. The Grinch yelped and jumped back, fleeing from the scene, and laughing with despicable glee as he ran.
Merry Christmas, you filthy animals!
By the time I looked back to my cousin, the fire had already consumed the base of the Christmas tree and was climbing with ferocious speed. Everyone at the rink now took notice, shrieking and panicking as if their life was in danger. My cousin was way up there, frantically trying to climb back down to no avail. I could see the fear on his face and the terrible decision in his eyes as he looked down, right at me. And that's when he jumped. He collided with the widening inferno wrapped around the tree before hitting the pavement, tumbling through the crackling flames before disappearing into the hellish orange smoke at the bottom. I rushed over, dropping the PlayStation on the ground and jumping the fence. The hot metal burned my hands, and the smoke poured into my lungs, giving me scar tissue that I can still feel to this day. I fumbled around in the zero visibility haze until I found my cousin and pulled him free from the fire. Out in the open, I could see everything. How mangled and charred his body was. I thought he was dead. I just sat there in shock next to his motionless body until the ambulance came and took him away. I want to say that luckily he did survive, but if you've ever heard what recovering from full-body third-degree burns is like, you'll have no trouble believing me when I tell you that my cousin himself said he'd rather be dead than deal with the pain. He was in a coma for weeks, and when he woke up, he had no skin at all. He didn't leave the hospital until just recently, and I don't think he'll ever look or act the same way ever again. And as far as what we got out of this, when I took the PlayStation box home and opened it, there was no game console in it at all. Just a couple bricks and an oversized star ornament, and with it, a Christmas card scrawled with chicken scratch that read, "Here's that ornament you were looking for. Merry Christmas."
Santa Claus is a fat, phony fraud. I know it. You know it. Everybody knows it. The big difference between you and me is that I had the guts to go and prove it. All these non-player characters in society masquerading as thinking human beings, just believing the ridiculous narrative that's been fed to them. That some obese man breaks into their house every year and gives them useless junk. Any logical person with his legendary power would just rob the whole world blind. It's absolutely shameful that parents indoctrinate their children into this farce in this modern day. No wonder we can't face our existential threats. We're too caught up in fairy tales like Santa Claus. But I'm here to put an end to this, once and for all. Just this last year, I have eyewitness indisputable proof that there is no man or being Santa Claus, but that the myth of the overweight home invader is perpetuated by an unspoken society of Santa Claus imposters. I've been trying to catch my local agent of the conspiracy for years, camping out on the living room couch every Christmas Eve, but every night passing out from the boredom, or maybe the chemtrails, seemingly moments before his arrival. Each time he slipped away, my curiosity burned hotter. 365 days is a lot of time, but that's how long I had to wait every time I screwed up. So, I learned to be prepared. To finally catch him, I trekked out into the snow and bought 2 highly caffeinated energy drinks and chugged them before bedtime. That would keep me awake, but I knew it wouldn't be enough proof just to see him. I think I had a pretty ingenious solution to this problem with a quick purchase on the dark web a few weeks prior. Every night before Christmas, my mother would bake cookies, and my father would make sure to tell me,
Hey, son, don't forget to set out some milk and cookies for Santa. It's the eldest child's duty to Christmas.
Yes, Father. And this year, I made sure to set everything out after everyone else had already gone to bed, to make sure it was nice and fresh for him. If Santa Claus wants some milk and cookies, he can have the best there is around. It's the perfect bait for the glutton. By 11 o'clock, I was positioned on the couch next to the fireplace with my eyes closed, faking sleep like a pro despite all the caffeine coursing through my veins. After what felt like hours of waiting in a deep meditative state, I finally heard him making his way into the house like a bull in a china closet. But when I opened my eyes, he wasn't standing at the hearth. He was already at the Christmas tree, down on one knee and laying out presents.
Hey, how'd you get in here?
Oh! Or should I say, ho ho ho! What are you doing up so late?
Who are you and how did you get in my house?
Why, I'm Santa Claus, young man, and I came in through the chimney. How else would I get in?
You're the St. Nicholas.
Of course I am, son. I came with all the presents you and your little brother wished for.
Well then, my apologies. Just don't forget your milk and cookies, Santa.
Oh, thank you, kiddo. That's very sweet of you.
As he waddled over to the end table with the midnight snack, I didn't take my eyes off him for a moment. I wanted to absorb every detail of this sighting. The way he crammed those sugar bombs into his gullet with all the crumbs falling into his tangled mess of a beard, and the downright wasteful speed with which he chugged the entire tall glass of milk. Disgusting. After he finished his diabetic binge, he didn't look me in the eye. He just stumbled back to the tree to set out the rest of the presents, and started on his way out through the fireplace.
I guess I'd better be going by now. Lots of other houses to...
My plan was working perfectly. I was just about to crack the big lie.
Son, what was in that...
He collapsed to the floor with a huge thud, just as I uncovered the identity of the imposter. I knew that voice, and I should have known it earlier. It was my father. My mother and my little brother both awoke to the startling sound of his fall. They rushed out of their rooms and looked on in horror, like their entire worlds had been shattered.
My boy, what have you done?
My little brother started bawling, but my mother wasn't there for him. She rushed to my father's aid, but it was too late. It was a pitiful sight, really. I admit, I had to take drastic measures to uncover the truth of the Santa Claus conspiracy. But even after all the sacrifices I've made, my resolve is still strong. Because I know that it was all in the honest pursuit of truth. I don't believe in coincidences anymore. I believe that everything in this world happens for a reason. Whether it's a supernatural entity or just simply the laws of attraction gravitating towards the desired outcome, I believe there's a reason behind all the madness. I unfortunately got stuck with the shitty end of the stick, as I have to live with a regretful decision I made every day. Living with regret is one of the most disheartening things a human can ever experience, especially if the majority of your livelihood consumes it. As I share my story with the world, I struggle with it every day, while reflecting on the bed of my jail cell. I've since turned to reading the Bible more, as there's not much to do besides working out or reading a catalog of books. Thoughts of a time machine taking me back to my past and correcting my mistakes is something I ponder often. It all started several years ago, when I was working at my local Dunkin' Donuts. The shop was located about 15 minutes walking distance from my house, so I usually didn't take public transit a whole lot. I was a high school graduate who worked full-time during the night shifts, trying to save up money to go to college. My ideal occupation was opening up my very own donut shop. I wanted to learn the business side of things, so I planned on working for at least a year before enrolling in school. What better way to start than Dunkin' Donuts? When I initially applied for the job, the only position available was the night shifts. The thought of working the graveyard hours wasn't exactly my cup of tea, but I took the gig anyway as I was quite desperate at the time. After about a month of working at Dunkin' Donuts, I found the job pretty interesting. The fresh scent of coffee was a distinct aroma I was quite fond of. A wide range of customers that would come in and out of the shop became regulars, who would always order their quote-unquote usual. There were, of course, the busy college students, who studied for hours on end for their upcoming exams. Then there were the loiterers, who were either homeless or just trying to take advantage of our 24-hour establishment. I personally couldn't care less who came by, as long as they didn't stir up drama or disturb any of the customers. My sister Anne and her boyfriend Jerry visited me at work pretty often. I would always see them come in together requesting the usual Boston cream donut with a hot chocolate on the side. While serving them, I would create small talk just to catch up with the two, as I genuinely enjoyed their company. As the weeks went by, my sister's relationship with Jerry would slowly diminish until they were permanently separated. They were allegedly getting into a lot of arguments, which led to the downfall of them eventually separating. I couldn't help but feel sorry for the two, as I felt like I was awkwardly inserted between them. We had developed a bond over time, only to have it crumble in a span of a week. What made things more bizarre was how Jerry slowly started turning into a pathological stalker. He'd always stop by my work just to see if my sister was around. He knew I only worked the night shift, so it was virtually impossible to avoid him. I remember he came up to the counter one shift and asked, "Hey Al, how are you?" "I'm good, Jerry. How can I help you?" "Any update on Anne would be nice. Why don't you invite her to join us for some coffee and donuts?" "Dude, please just order something." "How is she? Is she on Tinder? Can you please tell her to unblock me?" "She said she doesn't want a Minuteman anymore. Now can you please order something and leave me alone?" "Fine. Let me have one Boston cream donut with a hot chocolate." From that point on, I served Jerry his order without saying a word. I couldn't help but feel violated in a sense that I had to provide customer service for him despite his snarky attitude and the history between my family and him. I asked my boss if I could switch up my work hours, but unfortunately was declined. For about several weeks straight, Jerry would show up to the shop every time I was on the clock. He would always order the same Boston cream with a hot chocolate and eat it while glancing towards my direction. I would see him chew on the donut and sip on the hot chocolate without breaking eye contact. I was convinced he was antagonizing me intentionally just to get back at my sister for their fallout. It got to the point where I was contemplating a restraining order. Like I said before, this carried on for weeks, as Jerry would make the atmosphere at work extremely uncanny. I began developing resentment towards him the more we encountered each other. There was this one night where the last straw was pulled. It was a Tuesday evening. I was getting ready to clock out of my shift and finally head home. Jerry was in his usual spot, facing the front counter and watching me like a creep. The fact that I had to keep a standard of professionalism around him really made me dislike coming to work every day. My coworker finally arrives in the store and takes over my work duties. I began heading home while holding an umbrella from the misty rain that showered my whereabouts. The streets were dark and gloomy. I depended on the street lamps while walking as I couldn't see due to the heavy rain. That's when I heard the sound of running footsteps heading towards my direction. I instinctively turn around but don't see anybody. The sense of someone watching and following me was definitely there though. I began sprinting until I eventually stepped foot inside of my house. I slammed my front door shut and headed upstairs to my bedroom. As I was about to hit the shower, I saw Jerry standing outside my house holding a boombox over his head. My speculations were right. The footsteps were coming from Jerry. We both awkwardly lock eyes as the loud music coming from his boombox blasted through the neighborhood. It was almost like he was trying to serenade my sister with his bizarre antics. I opened my window and shouted,
Get the hell off my property or I'm calling the cops!
Jerry disturbingly smiles and begins to repeatedly smash the boombox on his scalp. I saw blood rush down his forehead and drip onto his clothes. I walked towards my dresser and grabbed my cell phone. As I was about to dial 911, I glanced out of my window and saw no sign of Jerry.
What the hell? Where did he go?
I was completely astounded and extremely hesitant to head back to work. The constant harassment and disturbing behavior led me to devise a sadistic plan. I ended up bringing home a Boston cream donut from work one day and filling it with rat poison. The possibility of Jerry visiting my workplace and ordering that same donut was inevitable. I knew that if we were going to cross paths, that it would potentially be his last remaining moments on Earth. The next day, I arrived at the Dunkin' Donuts a few minutes earlier than usual. I made sure to bring the tampered donut with me in a plastic Tupperware. My anxiety levels were through the roof as I began second-guessing my decision. That's when I see Jerry enter the store with scars imprinted on his forehead. He approached the front counter and said,
Hey, Al. Hey, how can I help you? You know the drill. Boston cream with a hot chocolate on the side.
How would you like to pay? Frickin' prick. Jerry sits in his usual spot and faces towards my direction. I took out my prepared donut and brought it to Jerry's table along with the hot chocolate. As I stood back behind the front counter, I noticed Jerry staring at the donut. This was quite uncharacteristic of him, as he would usually consume the contents by now. Oh no, why does he look suspicious? Could he have noticed the rat poison? I could have sworn I patched that donut up fine. Dark thoughts began lingering inside my head, the more Jerry sat there not doing anything. That's when my sister unexpectedly heads into the store and approaches the front counter saying,
Hey Al, how's work?
Work's fine, what are you doing in here?
I'm here to visit Jerry. I decided to give him another chance.
You what?
I just want to give him the opportunity and hear him out. Do you mind making me the usual?
Sure, Anne. As I watched them interact, I couldn't help but notice the two slowly become flirtatious with one another. It was almost as if they had magically cured their relationship within a few minutes of small talk. Here's when the story gets extremely disturbing. The two began making up by feeding each other their donuts. I yelled,
Ann, don't eat that!
But it was too late. My sister dropped to the floor and began spazzing out with foam coming out of her mouth. I immediately called 911 while Jerry attempts to revive Anne through CPR. Within a few hours of being in the hospital, she was officially pronounced dead at the scene. I struggle with the death of my sister every day. As I sit in my jail cell and share my story with the world, I truly miss my sister more than words could ever imagine. To be frank, I truly miss the free world, as I'm now stuck with my lackluster jail food. I'm fortunate enough to own a kettle in my cell. At least I can still enjoy the fresh scent of coffee. Sledding has always been one of my favorite wintertime activities. It can be dangerous, but it's totally worth it. There just isn't anything else in the world quite like it, for people on a budget at least. I always wanted to take a girl tobogganing too, so the first winter I had a girlfriend, I took her to the best place I knew of. It's got great hills for tobogganing, long and steep drops that take you to great speeds. It's such a popular place, in fact, that during the day it gets busy to the point of being hazardous. As in, you're liable to run into somebody who isn't paying attention. That's why I convinced my girlfriend to go with me in the evening. It's not exactly the smartest decision in terms of temperature and general visibility, but it was her first time tobogganing, so I figured a novice like her should have the whole slope to herself, especially since we couldn't go down together. I only had one toboggan, the same one I've had since childhood, and it was far too small for both of us to fit on at once. Not exactly as romantic as I'd planned, but you work with what you've got. Tracy wanted to go first. I was a little worried since I didn't get a chance to show her how it's done, but she took my advice quite well. I gently pushed her down the slope and she rolled the whole way with speed and grace, except for the very end. She was near the bottom and slowing down, and right as I was about to cheer, she tumbled right off the toboggan and landed flat on her back.
Tracy, you okay?
She didn't respond. I couldn't tell if she was hurt or just stunned, but I started making my way down the hill as fast as I safely could anyway. As I was trotting through the snow, I saw a dark figure come out from the trees. He looked a bit like Santa, dragging a sled behind him. I was only halfway down when I heard Tracy scream. I picked up my pace and ran to her side, shouting,
Hey, who the hell are you?
I finally made it to Tracy, who clambered up to her feet and hid behind my shoulder. It was getting dark, barely any daylight left, and only the light of a crescent moon to work with. But as the man stepped closer, I was able to see enough. He was dressed as Santa Claus, but he was really the Grinch, and I mean it. His skin was puke green, his eyes piss yellow and bloodshot, and his whole body cursed with unkempt green hair.
You know who I am. Who are you, huh? A tourist? Or perhaps a burglar in the night? Have you been waiting for me to fall asleep so you could sneak into my cave and strangle me in my bed? Huh? Why should I trust you? You're not from around here.
We're just tobogganing, dude. Like, what the hell is wrong with you?
Oh, is that so? Well, I see two of you and only one teeny tiny little toboggan. So I ask of you, good sir, how am I, the Grinch, supposed to believe that flimsy alibi?
Well, we're kind of broke.
Ah, what a tearjerker. Young broke love. Oh well, I guess I have no choice but to be the better man here. Fine, I'll give you my toboggan, young man, for a price.
Really? You'd do that? I thought you would, steal ours.
Nonsense! That was the old me. I'll give you my toboggan, little lady, if you do just one thing for me. Carve me the most spectacular snow angel you can, right here on this slope.
My girlfriend flopped right down into the snow and started flapping her arms and legs, but...
No, not there, you idiot! Get up! We're losing illumination out here. You gotta do it where it'll catch the moonlight. Follow me, come on.
He led us a few steps up the slope to what must have been the exact spot at which Tracy had tumbled. He pointed to the hard-packed snow and snapped his finger. Do it here. Tracy shot me a concerned glance, which I understood. I mean, snow angels are a fresh powder kind of thing. You can't really make one in a spot like that where it's more ice than snow. But she must have really wanted that toboggan, because she got down on the ground and went for it anyway. For the first minute, nothing happened. She flapped around like a fish out of water. It wasn't until her body heat started to melt the ice that she was able to make any progress. Slowly but surely, she made the angel-shaped indentation in the hillside. I heard the Grinch giggling to himself, like he was playing some kind of joke on us. But I had no earthly idea what it could be. Until the snow Tracy was uncovering turned dark red. I couldn't believe it at first, but the splotch of crimson grew wider by the second.
Tracy, get up! You're hurting yourself!
I turned to give the Grinch a death stare, but only caught the last little glimpse of him as he ran off into the trees with wretched laughter, leaving the sled behind. As Tracy got up from the ground, she finally noticed the bloody angel, but was miraculously unscathed. If it wasn't her blood, then whose was it? We got down on our knees and started digging through the snow with our hands. It was like digging through stone, but we had to see what was below. And sure enough, we did. With one last chunk of ice, I revealed the deathly face of a frozen little boy. We ran off, leaving both toboggans behind. Once in my car, we called the cops, who told us to wait so we could give our statements. Months later, the info went public. The boy had disappeared the night before we were there. He didn't come home from tobogganing. The Grinch had strangled him and cut him open just so he'd bleed through the snow he was buried in. The toboggan he was offering us was identical to the deceased boys they displayed on the news. To this day, Tracy swears the patch of ice she tumbled over was the spot of his shallow grave. It's safe to say Tracy and I haven't gone tobogganing since. I'd been driving for 2 days on a cross-country road trip, only taking breaks to sleep and refuel. I was somewhere in the middle of nowhere when snowflakes started to fall on my windshield. By the time I made it to the next exit, the visibility was too poor to drive in. To my surprise, not far off the ramp, there was a Chuck E. Cheese, just sitting by itself in a parking lot with no other buildings around it. It was nighttime, but the lights were still on. The inside was just as barren and empty as the surroundings. It was dead quiet, dimly lit, and to my disappointment, very drafty. Only one other customer was there taking shelter with me, a nice-looking girl sitting by herself. She looked up at me as I entered, so I walked up to her table and tried to strike up conversation. Hey, bet you thought you'd never seen one of these places out here.
I sure didn't. Kinda pops up out of nowhere. But it's nice, isn't it?
I looked around and lied. Sure, it's pretty nice. It's better than black ice.
So, what are you doing in the middle of nowhere?
Going home for the holidays, seeing the folks and all that.
Oh, that's great! Me too. Hey, you want some pizza? I ordered a pie, but they do 16 inches. I can't finish all that.
Oh, don't worry, I'll help you. Right as I sat down across from her, the pizza came out. It was gone in minutes. I was already starting to like this girl. It's not every day you meet a girl you can pig out on mediocre pizza with. Afterwards, we decided to mess around in the arcade. The girl went to the bathroom as I walked up to the cashier. He was this old shriveled husk in a cheesy uniform. I held out some cash and asked, "Hey, can I get this in arcade coins?" The old man took the money, then said something completely out of the blue.
Your girlfriend's looking tastier than our pizza.
Excuse me? The cashier ignored me as he counted the coins. It was then that I noticed the mascot. The rat stood in a corner behind the counter, motionless, staring with those empty black eyes.
Now you two have fun.
The cashier dumped a pile of coins into my hands. With that as a pass, I rushed away from the counter and did my best to forget about what the guy said. Unfortunately, that's when I saw how lame and defunct the arcade was. All the good games were out of order, and the only games left were the boring gimmicks that scam you out of your coins. But I'd already paid for the coins, so we decided to play anyway. The best thing they had was this claw machine with stuff like iPods and Bluetooth speakers for prizes. Of course, I couldn't get a single thing to drop into the bucket. The whole time, I could feel the eyes of the rat mascot all over me as he stood in a corner. I started to get frustrated, so I excused myself to the bathroom to calm down. I was only in there for a minute, but when I got out, the girl was gone. I looked around frantically, but I couldn't find her. The claw machine we were using just a minute ago was now covered up with a curtain and had an out-of-order sign taped onto it. And that rat mascot was standing right beside it, still totally motionless and still incessantly staring. I hustled up to the cashier once more and asked, "Have you seen the girl I was with? She was just here."
She left, sir, and you have to leave too. We're closing now.
What? But we were...
We are closed! Leave so I can go home!
But I literally just...
Leave us alone! I'm calling the cops!
Okay! I looked back to the mascot at the claw machine one last time. Its eyes had been following me from the moment I stepped foot in the place. I had no problem with getting away from that thing. I headed for the door, but when I got there, I stopped. I heard a noise, a thud, a rattling, and the faint echoing voice of a girl. I turned back to see the rat standing right in front of me. It was standing really close to me now. I could hear the person inside breathing heavily. I wanted to run past him and look for the source of the noise, but I had no idea how strong the guy inside the suit could have been. Reluctantly, I turned away and left the building into the fallen powder outside. As soon as I left the building, the light shut off and I could no longer see anything inside. I made my way to my car to sleep until it was safe to drive again. Except, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about that girl. Where did she go? I never even learned her name. To this day, I worry if I let something terrible happen right under my nose. Unfortunately, I don't even know where exactly I stopped that night. And without a name to give, there's not much help I can give to anyone who might be looking for her. It's a shame, really. She was very nice.
Everybody knows that mall Santas aren't the sort of people you should readily trust around children, which must be why there's always a crowd of elf characters in that area to keep the costumed man in check. I, for one, am certainly glad that this is the case, but likely not for the reason you'd expect. I have a terribly clear memory of one occasion with one of these mall Santas. I was much younger at the time. Young enough to still be interested in the idea of Santa Claus, but more than old enough to have my doubts about the truth of it. My whole family went out to the community mall for some last-minute Christmas shopping. The first thing that caught my attention was the staging area, right inside the entrance, where Santa Claus was granting wishes and taking pictures along with his team of elves. To my recollection, that was probably the most wholesome and charming Santa Claus charade the mall ever had. All the kids in line looked so excited to talk to the one and only St. Nicholas. I immediately started begging my parents to let me go see him. Mom, can we go see Santa Claus?
Maybe later, honey. The line is too long. We'd be there all day. We should go shopping while we have all our energy.
Okay. But if it's shorter later, can we go?
Sure, sweetie pie. You've been nice this year.
I guess my parents wanted to buy what they could before everything was gone. It didn't make sense to me at first, but the longer they made me wait, and the more times they asked me what I wanted for Christmas, the more it began to dawn on me that Santa Claus wasn't really the person who gave out the presents every year. Obviously, it was just the parents who bought things for their children. Otherwise, what would be the point of asking Santa Claus to get me something if Mom had just gotten me everything I wanted right in front of me? So, by the end of the shopping spree, I was in a pretty sour mood. I know that every kid has to realize this at some point, but having the magic stripped away so close to Christmas brought on a lot of conflicting emotions for the younger me. But it would only get worse from there. As we were about to leave the mall with our purchases in tow, we all noticed how much shorter the line for Santa had gotten.
Look at that, honey. You could almost walk right up to him.
At that point, I didn't even want to talk to him anymore. The glow was all gone. And now it seemed like every one of the few kids that were waiting in line were almost scared. Despite that, I just didn't have the energy to say no at the time. So we all shuffled into the queue so I could get to sit on Santa's lap. But as we got closer and closer, I started to see that the line wasn't the only thing that had changed in the few hours since I'd last seen the staging area. Santa Claus looked different. Before, he'd been this jolly old, warm and fuzzy-looking grandpa, but now, he didn't even look like the same person anymore. And it wasn't just that his fake beard wasn't on right. It looked like he was wearing some kind of mask. The smiling rosy cheeks from before had turned pale and droopy. I was extremely nervous by the time I got to the front of the line, but I don't think the rest of my family was paying attention. Everybody's just tired, that's all.
Go on, honey. Go get your picture.
Timidly, I stepped up to Santa's lap. Without a word, he picked me up with a vice grip and shoved me down between his legs. And what do you want for Christmas, kid? I couldn't respond. I was frozen with fear I couldn't explain. Well, kid? Come on, spit it out. You're not the real Santa. Huh? What'd you say? Speak up, I'm old. I said, you're not the real Santa Claus. You're a fake. I'd seen this movie where a guy tears the fake beard off the mall Santa. I thought it would be a great way to expose this guy who was giving me the creeps. But when I reached up with a quickness and yanked the white ball of fluff with all my might, more came off than I expected. The entire face peeled off and crumpled up in my stunned grasp. The real face of the man beneath was caked in blood and bits of tissue, grinning at me maniacally with all wretched manner of craggly teeth and sharp features. After that initial moment of shock, he threw me off to the ground and started running for the door. I remember being unable to move, hearing a cacophony of shrieks and shouts and wailing. The man didn't get far. The security guards ran him down with an initiative I'd never seen from a mall cop before or since. In the coming days, we found out that the original Santa Claus actor was discovered in his van out in the mall parking lot, naked, with his face cut off. He went on break and never came back. We never learned that psycho's motive, but one thing's for sure. I will never forget that moment every time I hear the name Santa Claus come up.
You boy, go get me some fresh meat from the food court.
Even if you've known somebody for years, that doesn't mean you can trust them. It's almost impossible to truly know who someone is deep down. You can never tell when someone will betray you. Take this past New Year's, for instance. I surprised my girlfriend at the time with a stay at a very romantic cottage in the woods. It wasn't until we drove all the way out into the wilderness that I realized just how secluded the little holiday home was. But my girlfriend, Cindy, seemed quite pleased with it. As I was taking in the luggage, I noticed a snowman in front of the house. I didn't think much of it then. I thought it was a fitting decoration, with the classic top hat and carrot nose. Very seasonal. My girl and I settled right into the cozy digs and made dinner. We had planned for this whole retreat to be relaxing and romantic, but that entire meal was consumed in silence. A tense atmosphere hung over us, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Afterwards, I felt the long drive catch up to me with the sudden urge to test out the plumbing in the cottage toilet. There was no cell service out where we were, so I got bored just sitting there. That's when I noticed that there was a curtained window in the bathroom. Simply out of curiosity, I reached up and pulled back the curtain, and right there was the snowman staring right at me. I closed the curtain and jumped to my feet, frantically pulling up my pants. That sight sent a jolt through me that cut my business short, no doubt about it. I rushed out and waddled up to the front door.
John, what's up?
I threw open the door and peered out into the frigid sunset snow. The snowman was still there, right where it was when we got there. It hadn't moved an inch.
John, close the door. It's cold.
I slammed the door and stormed back into the bathroom, yanking back the curtain. Nothing. I swear whoever's watching me is asking to get it! I stammered back into the main room in a heated state. when I finally remembered the whole purpose of the trip.
There's nobody watching us, John, honey. It's just you and me.
Later that night, we both laid out in bed, exhausted. Cindy had done her best to distract me from the snowman problem, but even after she'd been asleep for a couple of hours, I couldn't relax. That tense feeling was still churning. Outside, the winds were picking up, whistling through the trees and around the walls of the house. In all that noise, another sound invaded any remaining semblance of peace. A soft tapping on glass from a window somewhere in the building. A chill ran down my spine. Very quickly, it grew to the sound like a fist banging on the pane, about to burst through. I shot up out of bed so fast I almost woke Cindy. Following the sound to the living room, I could hear the ever-loudening banging coming from the window right by the door. I inched closer, afraid, but about to pull back the curtain, and that's when the whole window exploded under the pressure and cut up my face with a shower of glass shards. The howling wind rushed in from the broken window, blowing back the curtain, and standing right there on the porch, the snowman again, piercing me with his soulless button eyes.
Didn't I tell you not to screw with me? Huh? Now look what I gotta do! I know you're not just a snowman, you peeping punk!
The fury didn't subside with the snowman's destruction. I felt I was catching on to whatever was happening, and I was going to stop it. I stomped out barefoot, looking for the footprints of a prankster or a peeping Tom or somebody, but the moonlight revealed only fresh, undisturbed powder. Frustrated, I hobbled back inside on nearly frozen feet to wash the blood and glass from my face and maybe start up the fireplace and thaw out my souls. But, of course, the first thing I saw in the bathroom was that rotten snow freak staring right through the window.
Didn't I just destroy you? Are my fists not good enough? Fine, I got something else for you.
I'd seen it earlier, but I didn't think I'd use it for anything but chopping firewood. The rustic axe mounted above the fireplace. I plucked it from its resting place and took it in both hands, ready to go back outside and finish the job. But once I opened the door, I heard myself thinking with reason. No footprints. No footprints. Somebody's playing a game with me. This snowman is just a pawn. Yes, just a pawn. There can only be one culprit. Yes, only one person it could be. Oh, Cindy! I figured out that little joke you've been pulling on me. I walked back into the bedroom and stood over the sleepy Cindy, who was just starting to stir. She looked up at me with confused eyes, like she didn't know.
Huh? John? What are you... Hey! What are you doing?
I swung the axe down into her pretty chest with a surge of relief, putting my weary mind at ease. But her screaming was messing up my moment of zen, so I yanked it out of her ribcage and plunged it back in with all its heft again and again, until she finally shut up and stopped that horrible gurgling sound. Then, I thought, might as well be as thorough with you as I was with the snowman. So, I made sure to purge every shred of aggression in my heart.
I'm not stupid! I don't like games! You shouldn't put me on edge!
After a while, there wasn't much left of silly little Cindy. That, and the bed was starting to break. So, I started that fire I was thinking about earlier, and really got relaxing through the rest of my vacation. Looking back, even though she betrayed me, I do regret how I handled the situation. I was a little brash, but maybe next time I go on a cottage retreat, my new girlfriend will remember to pack my meds. I used to love going to Chuck E. Cheese. My parents would take me there every Thursday night when I was younger. I can't say that love remains since I've gotten older. It's all because of that one night. It began so perfectly. It was my birthday, so I got a huge allowance for arcade coins. The arcade was always my favorite part of Chuck E. Cheese. No grown-ups, no creepy mascot, just games as far as I could see, and so many tickets. I was racking up enough of them to go for the plastic gun and handcuffs on the top shelf behind the prize counter. I'd wanted it for so long, and I was finally going to get it. But as I ran around a corner looking for the next game to dump my coins into, I ran into an adult. "Oh, sorry, sir." "Watch out there, little buddy. I didn't mean to." "It's okay. I'm glad we bumped into each other. I want to introduce you to my son, Alex." I hadn't even noticed that there was a kid with him until then. He was so small and frail, compared to how pudgy his father was. He didn't even look related. "Go on, say hello, Alex." "I guess you're feeling a little shy today. That's okay. What's your name, son?" I'm Jimmy." "Well, that's great. I think you and Alex will become good friends. Why don't you play some games together?" After that, the man just walked away, leaving his son with me without even giving me a moment to respond. I sure felt bad for the kid, but I didn't want him to take any of my tickets. We stood awkwardly for so long, it was unbearable. The kid's eyes were so empty, like he couldn't even see me. More than anything, I just wanted him to stop looking at me for one moment. Then, I noticed something hanging loosely from his wrist. A smartwatch. I wondered how a kid who looked so hungry could have something that expensive. It was the only thing I had for some conversation to break the silence. "Hey, that's a nice watch. How'd you get it?" "Oh, this? Did you want it? If you beat me in a game of skee-ball, I'll give it to you." "Really? You just let me have it? What a sucker," I thought. This kid had no idea how good I was at skee-ball. A smartwatch was a way better prize than a plastic gun, and I was bound to have both. Sure enough, I smoked him fair and square. It didn't feel right, though. The kid didn't seem like he was trying to put up a fight at all. He didn't even score a single ball. But he still gave me the smartwatch, so I didn't argue. He handed it to me without crying or anything, and as soon as I figured out how to put it on my wrist, he was gone. I didn't see him or his father the rest of the night at Chuck E. Cheese. I was confused, but I forgot about the whole thing quickly. I got my prize and ate my pizza, then I went home. After I was supposed to be asleep, I was sitting up in my bed checking out all the features that came with my new toy. I spent a few hours just playing the games that were built into it. Then, at about 2 in the morning, a notification popped up. It read, "Your location services have been turned on." Right after that, another message from an app I didn't recognize. "Your location is now being tracked." Suddenly, a pit formed in my stomach. I started sweating, panicking. My heart was racing. I quickly made the decision to turn it off completely and threw it away from myself. Several eternal minutes of waiting in tense, breathless silence followed. I heard footsteps through the window. I jumped off my bed and hid behind it, staring into the night just outside. I got played on my birthday.
In my last year of high school, my parents pressured me into getting a job to save money before I moved to college. I knew they couldn't offer me much once I left, so I didn't really have much choice. But with school still hanging around my neck, I wouldn't get a job that required real work. Instead, I applied for a part-time position as an elf in the local mall, backing up the visiting Santa Claus. I figured it couldn't be any harder than smiling and helping kids up and down from Santa's lap, and ushering away the occasional temper tantrum, of course. I got the job without any trouble, and initially, my hopes were high. The man who'd been hired to play Santa Claus really did look like the St. Nicholas himself. He didn't need one of those cheesy fake beards. His genuine facial hair was spot on. Plus, the fluffy suit of red and white looked like it had been tailor-made specifically for him. It was still early in the morning when I walked in on my first day. The mall wasn't even open yet, so I thought I should introduce myself before the day began. Good morning, sir. I'm the new helper elf.
Oh, good. Fresh meat. Make a good impression and get me some coffee, dear boy.
The way he spoke threw me off. He sounded like Santa, but he didn't say the things you'd expect Santa to say, or in the way Santa would. I glanced around idly to the other elves, meeting their intense stares. One of them looked at me with wide eyes and said, "Get the freaking coffee, dimwit." I heeded the urgency in his voice and rushed off to the food court. I didn't even know where the break room was, so I had to pay for a cup out of pocket from a restaurant, which was still opening up. When I got back, the elf that spoke to me before was knelt below Santa's chair, polishing his boots. It was a really strange sight, and it certainly wasn't in her job description. Still, I didn't want to intervene, so I did my best to ignore it as I handed Santa his coffee.
See this here, dear boy? This is what happens when you speak out of line. Elves need to respect Santa, and of course his beautiful reindeer. Got it?
Yes, sir.
You mean, yes, Santa.
Right, I'm sorry, Santa. At that point, I could understand why he was calling us dear boys and girls. He had a strange obsession with reindeer, so I assumed the pun was being said intentionally. I began having serious doubts about the job. However, as soon as the mall opened up and kids started lining up to meet us, things got easier. That's when Santa finally got into character, and for the duration of the business hours, he was the jolly man he was supposed to be. Thankfully, my shifts ended before Santa's, so I didn't have to deal with him during close. For the first couple weeks, every day was more or less the same. Every evening, I'd get home depressed, wondering how such a jerk could be Santa Claus. And every morning, I'd return to be slave to his beck and call. Over time, I found a certain urge of defiance building up inside of me every time I heard him order us around. Always, dear boy, do this, dear girl, do that, like we were his servants, as if we were dear to his heart in any way. One morning, I went in with a scowl on my face from all the pent-up frustration, and that Santa poser was right on top of me for it.
Hey, you! You're always leaving early and weaseling out of cleaning. Vacuum the stage, because somebody did a lousy job last night.
By the time I got back with the vacuum, he had another order for me.
You boy, go get me some fresh meat from the food court.
Okay, sir, just as soon as I finish cleaning.
Do it now! Do you want to learn what it's like to be one of my reindeer?
They're not even open yet, old man. Give me a minute.
I clammed up, but I'd already let slip enough to piss him off. The other elves stared on in fear.
Dear boy, I'm gonna rip your stupid elf ears off and make them my earmuffs! Leave me alone or I'm calling the cops!
He lunged at me with sudden speed, but he was caught and held back by the other elves, thrashing and screaming. He eventually caved in and exited the mall. After that, the only thing left was explaining to the public why Santa had disappeared. We didn't mind. A whole mall full of kids bawling from disappointment was easy compared to dealing with that jerk. We improvised with the picture setup and carried out work for the rest of the day. Unfortunately, things took a sour turn when I got off. I was walking through the parking lot to get to my bus stop when I saw a Christmas stocking cap fluttering behind a dumpster. I could tell there was someone behind there. I crept up and looked over the edge and saw the mall Santa eating the mangled corpse of a deer. He looked up at me with blood streaming from his mouth and said,
Dear boy, would you like some venison?
"What the hell are you doing?"
What? Can't you see why I call you stupid elves my dear boys and girls now?
I ran away as fast as I could, traveling the extra few blocks down the road to wait anxiously for the next bus. When I finally got home, I stumbled in, shaking, and fell into my bed. For the next few days, I didn't leave the house. I quit that job at the mall and started applying elsewhere. I didn't sleep well. The image of raw venison between Santa's teeth flashed before me in the dark. By the time Christmas rolled around, I'd slipped back into my old lazy habits like a coping mechanism.
Hey, son, we're going to the store to get some dinner. You want anything? Pizza? Fried chicken?
Sure, Dad. How about venison?
I had only been working at Dunkin' Donuts for a month when I got promoted to night manager. To be honest, when my boss called me into his office, I thought I was about to get wrung out for my 30-day evaluation. Instead, he praised me for being such a hard worker, then offered me a better position. I wasn't quite sure whose work ethic he was talking about, because it certainly wasn't mine. But I didn't bite the hand that fed me. The new position came with a hefty pay raise, and my boss told me that I'd get to make the nighttime schedule with my preference of employees. It seemed like a pretty sweet deal, so I took it. I convinced the most chill coworker I knew to do most of the graveyard shifts with me. He was easily convinced by the wage increase I offered him. And as expected, the flow of customers from 10 at night to 6 in the morning was really low, so it was quite an easy way to make money. We didn't mind the eerie atmosphere of the dead hours. Most nights, we'd stay awake with endless free coffee and keep everything mostly clean just to remain occupied as the store was empty most of the time. Around 2 a.m. was when we'd get the only rush of customers. A handful of friendly drunk people would stagger in from the bars after they would close for the night. My coworker and I didn't really mind these people, though. We actually got to know most of them. It only took a couple of weeks to get used to the graveyard shift. I became good friends with my coworker, and most of the time we spent slacking off was used to talk about what we'd do with the money we were earning from the new grind. But one night, just a few minutes after starting my shift, I got an oddly frantic call from my boss while I was at the register.
Hey Ryan, how are you doing tonight? Right, good, okay. So I'm leaving the country. I'm going on vacation for a little while. Well, really, I'm leaving the franchise. I've gotten a great return on a few investments I've made, so I'm retiring. Yeah, retiring. And because you've been such a hard worker and you took such great charge of the night shift, I put in a strong recommendation for you to be the new regional manager. I want you to take over my position. Wait, really? That's great, thank you.
I could hardly get a word in, but I was too elated with the good news to care.
Yeah, you've basically got the position. Just keep up the good work, okay? Oh, and by the way, there's a contractor coming in tonight to upgrade the coffee machine. Just let him through quickly, alright? He's got a lot of coffee machines to work on tonight. From what Dylan suggested anyway. Sure thing, boss. Hey, you're the boss now, Ryan. Listen, you probably won't hear from me again. The regional manager is going to train you. Goodbye.
There was a dumbfounded grin stuck to my face. My coworker was just arriving to his shift, a good 15 minutes late as usual.
Hey Dylan, guess what?
He seemed surprised by the energy in my voice.
I'm getting fired? Nah, man. We're both getting promoted again. You're looking at the new store manager. Well, I'll be. Does this mean I get paid more? If you work more.
Darn. I guess I ain't getting paid more. Dylan then went to the break room to clock in. He obviously wasn't as excited as I was. Just as I turned my attention back to the register, my eye was caught by movement on the other side of the glass at the front of the store. A rusty windowless van rolled up and triple parked right in front of the door. From the condition of the van, I expected the man inside to be in similar shape, unshaven and unkempt, with a beard gut and a trucker hat. But I was wrong. The driver busted out of the van and entered the store in a rush. He threw open the door and marched up to the counter, then stopped and stared me down. He was not haggard at all. Actually, he was quite physically fit and surprisingly sharply dressed. Still, jeans and a plaid button-down, but undirtied and freshly ironed. I figured this was just his first job of the night. but the way he stood before me so motionless was a little unsettling after he'd been moving so quickly a moment ago. "I'm here to work on your coffee machine." His voice was booming and robotic. I suddenly felt bad for having just stood there and wasted his time. Before I found my words, Dylan came back from the break room. He eyed up the contractor. "Our coffee machine works fine, though." "He's here to upgrade it." "He's fine. Come on back, sir." I waved the contractor through. He found his way to the coffee machine without looking at a single thing. He set down his tools and started dismantling the machine with expert efficiency, like he knew every component by heart. Dylan and I traded a confused look, but we just shrugged it off. The contractor didn't seem to care about our presence whatsoever, so we decided not to care about his. We struck up some quiet small talk at the counter and waited for the contractor to finish. He was done far sooner than I expected. We didn't even notice when he walked up right next to us and almost shouted in our ears, "Your coffee machine is ready for use again." "Okay, thank you." The contractor looked us over with a blank expression, then walked away without a word. He got into his van and drove off. When he was finally out of sight, Dylan and I breathed a sigh of relief. Jeez, what was up with that guy? I don't know, bro. He didn't seem normal at all, did he? Whatever, man. At least he's gone. He didn't steal anything, did he? Nah, he didn't touch the registers or anything. Didn't go near the safe, either. Let's just get back to work, then. Dylan got a rag and a spray bottle and started cleaning the counter. Nice work ethic, Dylan. I might just start paying you more after all. The next few hours of the shift were dreadfully uneventful. We barely got any customers whatsoever. We started using the upgraded coffee machine at around 1 in the morning. Sure enough, it tasted a little fresher, but also a little more bitter. We guzzled it down anyway. Just after 2 a.m., the usual crowd of wandering drunkards stumbled in, making their rowdy banter as always. They started to line up at the counter when I got an idea. "Hey everyone, I've got good news. Instead of getting your usual friends and family discounts, everyone gets a free round of hot and fresh, new and improved coffee on the house." Dude, what are you doing? That's not our policy, bro. Relax, Dylan, it's alright. I basically own this place now. And so, everyone in the restaurant was gifted free coffee from yours truly. It seemed to put everyone in good spirits. After everyone got the rest of their orders, a few croissant sandwiches and a box of donut holes, I left the register and went to talk with Dylan, who was cleaning the griddle after the food rush. Things are looking pretty positive, aren't they? Maybe for you. You're the one getting promoted and everything. I mean, I was working here way before you, but whatever. Oh, hey man, don't get so down. You get a premium raise out of this. You've been working hard, you deserve it. Dylan didn't say anything in response. He just kept cleaning the grill. But he wasn't really cleaning it. He was just slowly brushing the same spot over and over again. He wouldn't look at me. Suddenly, I felt sick, almost like I was drunk. My vision started to blur and my knees were shaking. I panicked and stumbled out into the front of the restaurant to try and get help from the customers, but when I got there, I realized I was on my own. Each and every one of them was unconscious and laid out across the floor, slumped over the tables or hanging out of the chairs. Just a moment ago, they'd all been lively and rowdy, but now they looked dead. My vision kept getting darker, and when I tried to take a step towards the door, I realized I couldn't move my legs. I collapsed like a sack of bricks. I couldn't move a muscle, but it was like I could still see through a keyhole of vision. I began to regurgitate all the coffee I'd consumed earlier and forcibly vomit all over the ground. I remember seeing Dylan sprint out of the front door as if he was going to call for help. I remained laying on a puddle of my own vomit for the next 30 minutes or so, till the paramedics finally arrived. After reflecting back at this story, it was later confirmed that Dylan had hired a hitman disguised as a contractor in an attempt to assassinate me with a compromised coffee machine. What makes this story more disturbing is how Dylan is still on the run. and how his motive still remains unknown to this day. I personally think he got upset at how I got the role of being a store manager over him. But what I don't get is how he could be so cold-hearted enough to let all those customers drink from that coffee machine.
About several years ago, I used to work at an engineering firm where I would get carpal tunnel from typing on the keyboard all day. It was currently a Friday, so I figured I'd treat myself to a beer after my shift was done. Figured I could get hammered for a change, instead of heading home to an empty house with no female companionship. During my lunch break, I remember Googling any nearby pub and bar to go to. I came across a Hooters that was located about 15 minutes away by vehicle. I had previously been to many Hooters in the past and always found it quite charming to say the least. If I had to describe it, I would say it was like your ordinary sports bar, accompanied by some of the finest girls who wore their distinctive Hooters attire, of course with the orange shorts. Like I said before, I had been to many Hooters venues in the past, so going to this new location was really refreshing. As I made my arrival, it was roughly evening time, which meant that the place was probably hoarded with customers. I pushed open the front doors and saw exactly what I had anticipated. A bunch of attractive Hooters waitresses and a bunch of men flirting with them who were old enough to be the girls' fathers. I made my way across the bar while slowly glancing at the array of bottles behind this attractive bartender. I casually leaned against the bar as she approaches me saying,
What you drinking today, big guy?
"Rum and Coke, please." The waitress then begins whipping up the concoction while staring across the bar at someone. At first, I couldn't tell exactly what she was looking at, but then I saw a rather large gentleman sitting at a table alone, making direct eye contact with her. If I had to describe the man, I would say he was in his late 40s and had a beer gut hanging onto his lap. I assumed he was just some creep who had a crush on the bartender. As the Hooters lady began serving my drink, I nosily asked her, "Hey, is everything okay?"
Not really. That weirdo across the room keeps looking at me.
"He's probably just a big fan of your drinks."
Yeah. Not to mention there's been a rumor circulating around town. Hooters girls have gone missing.
What? Are you freaking kidding me?
Hey, make me a beer, lady!
Get someone else to do it. I'm about to clock out, pal.
Make me a beer or else I'm telling your boss your shorts are tight enough to see your— Leave her alone now!
About 5 minutes after that bizarre encounter, I felt obligated to escort the lady outside the parking lot, and even went as far as to offer her a lift. The lady took me up on my offer as she wanted to avoid further confrontation with any creeps lurking in the night. As I drove down the street, I began striking up a decent conversation with the lady. Everything was pretty swell till she asked,
So, where are you heading after?
"What do you mean?"
Like, after you drop me off. Are you heading home?
"Who says you're heading home?"
What?
You know, you should really be more careful before getting into a stranger's car. After all, Hooters waitresses have been disappearing, haven't they?
No! No, stop! Stop! Somebody help me!
Your parking spot? You can kindly park somewhere else, bud.
What? You heard the lady! Now park somewhere else before I park my fist in your face! Ugh. I bet your wife wants me to park this Big Mac truck in her little garage, ho!